Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Monday. I hope you're having a good one, ready to start your week off. If not, we're going to do it for you. We've got the voice of the Hoosiers, Don Fischer, brought to you by our good friends from Southern Stone Restaurant, where you can find him tonight at 7:05. No, is there a show tonight? No show tonight.
No show
See,
tonight.
I remember tonight. I remembered. I can't believe it. Normally, you can find him at 7:05 at Southern Stone Restaurant, which Coach Mike Whitson for Inside Indiana Basketball. No show tonight. He'll be back next week to do that. Don, welcome aboard. How are you, sir? How was your weekend?
It was busy and it was good. I mean, obviously, Indiana winning over Illinois was really, really, really good. Since Illinois is my home state in the sense that I haven't lived there for 50 some years, but nevertheless, that's where I came from. I was an Illinois fan growing up. Not a giant Illinois fan because I really didn't care about college basketball and football that much. When you were growing up in your teenage years, there are so many other things to do. So, so at any rate, but I did follow Illinois pretty much, and so anytime we beat them, it's really exciting for me because they cheated back in the day, and I didn't like cheaters. I'm talking about the Mike White era and the slush fund that they had back in the 60s with Harry Combs, who was the basketball coach. I know all about that stuff. I didn't forget it, Illinois. Trust me, I know all about you people.
And that's straight up cheating, people. So we're not talking about nickel and diamond stuff. Yeah, before you came on, Don, we were having a conversation about tired. Someone, a lot of people said, "Oh, I think this IU men's team looks tired." This, that, and I'm like, baloney, BS, horse crap. I'm on the Mike Woodson camp. These guys got energy to spend. Now, I'm not saying you can't get tired or mentally you can't get tired, but I think about Northwestern. They've been on this run. They've got all these games. So I pulled up the numbers. Boo Booey and Chase Audige, they're both playing 35 minutes a game. You're going to have that for certain teams. The Stars are just going to have to play more, and they have to deal with it, man. You can rest after the season, like Mike Woodson says. I think that I don't believe in that being tired thing right now for these guys. I think that they're fine. They may be stressed in certain ways because the season starts to compact and what it means and what you're trying to do, where you're trying to get to, that starts to come into focus in a lot more, but I physically, I think they're fine.
Well, I mean, I think you're right about that in some respects, but here's what you got to know. Bob Knight, when he was coaching Indiana, always started in late January, early February of not practicing as many minutes. They just didn't practice as many minutes. They started cutting back on practice time. I don't know if Mike's doing that. He indicated to me, and I think on our last talk show, that he really hasn't cut back on practice time at all. That they're still practicing their 2 hours a day, whatever it may be. Although I will say this, a lot of what Mike does is very technically oriented in the sense of teaching these guys, I want you to be here, not over here. I want you to be there, not there. So they stand around a lot in practices in the sense that they're not just going at it, bang, 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 bang. They're practicing, but they're learning what he wants them to do. Therefore, even though the practices it might be still a full 2 hours, it's not as, they're not banging and they're not running up and down the court the entire time. So I think I will tell you one thing. Back in the 2013 season, that team was dead tired at the end of the year. That was when Tom Crean coached them. That was Cody Zeller, Victor Oladipo, Jordan Halls, Christian Watford, all those guys. That team was dead tired in the postseason. They almost got beat by Temple, and it looked like they were wore out in that ball game. And then they went up against Syracuse, and they didn't play very well at all. That team was tired. And I've talked to a couple of players on that team, and they were tired. So I do think that comes into play. It depends on how they handle things during the season and whether or not they're going at it full bore all the time. So I think you have to play that by ear if you're a coach, and you can see whether your team. But I don't think this team's wore out. I really don't.
Well, and to that point, Don, we talked about, I don't know whether they're tired or not. I'm not there. I don't see them. I don't talk to
Right.
them, so I have no idea. But if there's a level of tiredness coming in, this is still a team that has won 8 out of its last 10 games. They had a chance. They're a buzzer beater away from winning 9 of those 10 against
Sure.
Northwestern. We talked about early in this season, this team didn't maybe have the same level of toughness that we'd like to see. That has completely flipped. I mean, they are leaps and bounds above where they were 2 months ago. So, from a mentality standpoint, I don't know if I've seen this sort of growth from an individual team because they are finding ways to win. Against Michigan, it was they had to do it defensively. Against Illinois, you look down some of the stats. They had more turnovers than Illinois. They shot fewer free throws. They had one less three-pointer in that game. They are finding ways to win. And you go back to whatever it was, the players only meeting, Mike Woodson challenging this team. This team has a completely different mentality than they had in December.
Dustin and I can't agree more. I've said this to whoever would listen. I think the most improvement on this basketball team is their ability to finish games this year.
Yeah.
I mean, look at last season, the number of games they were right in at the end and couldn't get it done. And this year, most of the time, they're getting it done. And they probably should have gotten it done against Northwestern if they hadn't dug that 19-point hole at halftime. They would have won that ball game. But they are finding ways to finish. And that has been, as Tom Allen used to say, we got to finish, and had that as a theme one year, that kind of thing. Well, this team has figured it out. They have found ways to finish. And they got guys making a lot of different guys making a lot of big plays in games like this. Yeah. Miller Kopp had a couple of really, even though he scored points, he had a couple of really good defensive plays, a deflection in this ball game that were critical down at the end. We're seeing other guys step up. Malik Renew has played some of his best basketball here of late. And we're not getting as much out of Jordan Geronimo as I would like right now, but he could step up. Tamar Bates is having up and down ball games at this point, but somebody is always stepping up. Somebody on this team is doing his thing. And Jalen Hood-Schifino is playing terrific in many respects and still making a lot of mistakes, freshman mistakes at this point with his passing at times and dribbling the ball off his foot, which, it's going to happen. These are freshmen. They're going to make mistakes. So all of these things come into play. You might have a mistake made that cost you the ball game. I mean, and in truth, there are. I mean, you look at the Northwestern game. You can talk about 2 or 3 plays that were very costly toward the end of that contest. So it all boils down to this: if you're well coached and you have the right mentality, you got a chance. And I think with this team, they've got both those things going for them.
Yeah, Jalen Hood-Schifino, you mentioned him. I love the fact that here's a guy that he's been thrust into a position that he didn't, no one expected to completely be in charge of the offense, which he has done a pretty damn good job of stepping into that. He's had trouble shooting the ball. Last game he goes 5 of 17, but still scores 13 points. He's 2 of 2 at the free throw line. He pulls down 7 rebounds. He has 5 turnovers, but he has the ball in his hands all the time. And so the freshman, the little bit of freshman mistakes that he is making, he's probably being asked to do this in he's being played twice as much as, or the ball is in his hands twice as much. So he's having way more pressure than I think a lot of people expected he would have. And I don't mean mentally. I just mean in the games. I mean, he's the focus. So I think he's done a hell of a job stepping up into that and continuing to contribute. 13 points in that last game, one of 4 players in double figures. So he's still contributing, and he's not letting any down part of something that happens bring him down. He stays up and continues to contribute. One of the reasons this this team continues to move upwards.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hood-Schifino has been tremendous for this ball club. There's no question about it, especially with X being out for basically the entire Big Ten season at this point. X played 2 games against Big Ten opponents in December and hadn't played a game since then. And there's going to be a point where he comes back here, we think, in the next couple of weeks, and he'll be put back in that lineup, whether it's as a starter or coming off the bench. We'll have to wait and see on that. But the fact that X will come back, in my opinion, if you look at the Northwestern game, one of the reasons Indiana didn't win that game was because of X not being there. X is a guy that's so quick, tough, athletic at the defensive end of the floor. If he does nothing at the offensive end, he would have been a major factor against Boo Buie. And he just wasn't there. So I can't wait till he gets back, because I think the Maryland game was another one where Young went nuts against us because he was quicker and really a tough guy to stop inside. And who would have been better at stopping him than Xavier Johnson? So I can't wait to get him back on the floor to help this basketball team. And I know that it could disrupt things a little bit as far as who's playing and playing time and all that kind of things. But I just think it helps this team. It doesn't hurt this team. By far, it's going to be the most important find for this ball club to get him back, because he can do things that other guys in this team can't.
Don, something that to me is, and people may find this to be funny that I'm going to say this, but I think the difference maker for this team down the stretch in winning the Big Ten tournament, making a deep run into the NCAA tournament, is going to be Miller Kopp. We know what he can do. The last game, he scores 12 points, 4 of 6 shooting, 4 of 5 behind the arc. He was hunting shots. I mean, Lee, he was looking for that 3-point shot. The first one he took was 4 feet behind the stripe, I think. It's the longest 3-point attempt I've seen him make, or even attempt. There was another attempt he had where he faked once, he had to move it, faked again, and I think faked 3 times before he actually still ended up shooting the ball and hit it. Something that he just has not done. I don't know if it's his confidence or what, but having Miller Kopp to be able to do that, to actually look for and hit his shot, is a difference maker for this team.
Well, the question is, how often will he do that? Because
yes, and that's my point of getting him to consistently do that.
Well, against Northwestern, he shot 6 times and made 1.
Right.
So if you look at Miller and how he produces, he'll have a good game, or maybe a decent game, and then a really good game, and then he'll have no game. From a production standpoint, is all I'm saying. He plays hard the defensive end all the time. He makes plays with his hands occasionally, deflections, those kinds of things. I give him credit for all that kind of stuff. He doesn't rebound much at all. He really doesn't do much in that area. And when he is not shooting the basketball, what happens? We probably don't play as well. It's that simple. But I agree. I think he can be a factor. But there are other guys in this team that can be as well. Trey Galloway is not shooting as much as I think he should shoot either. I tell him to shoot every time, and I see him. I mean,
both of those guys, they're like one and the same. They both should be looking for their shots because they're both good shooters.
Right, exactly. But look, I mean, Mike Woodson has his game plan. He knows what he wants from these guys. I can't argue with what we've seen so far this year. We've seen a ball club that has stepped up. There are different guys that show up every ball game and produce. Are we getting everything we'd like to see out of some of these guys? Probably not. But then there might be reasons behind that. I'm not a coach, and I'm not there for practices most of the time. I can't tell you what is emphasized. And what's emphasized is usually what you see these kids doing. So if they weren't doing it, they'd be sitting on the bench.
Right. And one of those things, we can talk about whether guys should shoot more or what they're getting from a production standpoint, but I think, and this probably goes back to the mentality point, but I keep harping on this because it's one of the more impressive things I've seen. But to me, even if some of these guys have a bad night or aren't productive, the fact that they step up and it's like they're ready to go. Like, hey, this is going to be your night. You got to take advantage. You see that from different guys throughout this last, I don't know, 10 or 15 games where guys are stepping up into that role. And I go back to what Mike Woodson said in the summer. Like, if I call your number, you better be ready to go, because you might get, if I give you 10 minutes and you don't give me anything, you may not get called next time.
Yeah.
So whether I'm going to call you for 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 32 minutes, you better be ready to go. And I feel like now we're starting to see these guys accept that. So maybe they're not the most productive, but I feel like these guys, when their number's called, I don't feel like they're just out there going through the motions like I was 2 months ago.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, they're getting more out of each guy that gets on the floor. And you can see whose minutes are getting diminished. You can see whose guys that are getting more minutes. And it's all based on their production or what they do when they come into the ball game. And Mike has said that all along. These guys, I think, now believe that. Therefore, I think the effort is there each time one of them comes out on the court. Now, because you get into foul trouble or something like that, that can diminish the opportunity. But at the same time, they're trying. They're trying to do what their coaches are asking them to do, which is a big, big factor for any team.